Greetings out there in podcast land. It's Benny and Dan coming at you with another episode of Jewanced Live. Today we're joined by Russell Robinson, CEO of JNF-USA. How you doing, Russell?
I'm doing great. How are you two doing?
We're doing amazing over here. Thank you so much for joining us.
So,
it's raining or it's not raining?
Kind of in between.
In betweenish. But we don't have the snow that you guys got going on over there. So, you know, better you than us. Before we get going here, I just wanted to ask you, Dan, there's a lot going on lately. For people that don't know, Dan's really involved with the UAE-Israel dialogue. He's one of the co-founders of the UAE-Israel Business Council. And it just seems like dominoes knocking over one after the other here. We got Morocco now. How's that going to affect your...
We're going to have to add another name to the acronym. UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan.
It's going to get
Israel
too long.
Business Council. No, it's unbelievable to think. I mean, could you have imagined 6 months ago? 6 months ago, could you have imagined that 4 Arab countries would normalize relations? Each one is its own fascinating story, and of course, there's a strategic aspect. It's not all lovey-dovey. We want to be friends with Israel. But just this week, a first delegation of non-governmental Emiratis and Bahrainis came to Israel through an NGO called Sharaka, connected to reservists on duty or reservists on the front. Fantastic group doing Israel advocacy. And I happened to be friends with some of these people on the trip. I had the pleasure of meeting them, eating dinner with them, going out to drinks with them, and just talking. And it's unbelievable. Their experience seems to be life-changing, and these people who are social media influencers, who are government advisors, these kind of people, they're going to go back and they're going to share something that people in the Arab world really didn't know about Israel. So first of all, it's not a war zone, at least the entire time, and at least most of the country's not. They're going to go back and say people were really genuinely nice to us. They're going to go back and after they toured Yad Vashem and share their what seemed to be an incredibly emotional experience there. And I'm hopeful for the first time in 20 years. I'm truly and honestly hopeful about what this does for the region. And it's nothing short of I don't want to say miraculous, but it is a hugely strategic realignment of the Middle East. I've been talking about for years in my lectures about a realignment of the Middle East. This pushes that easily a decade, 2 decades forward in one fell swoop. And we could be seeing more countries. There's talks about Pakistan. There's talks about even rumors about Saudi Arabia making some kind of big move before the Trump administration ends. It's really unbelievable. But we've also had a crazy week, or kind of a couple of weeks regarding the COVID vaccination.
Yeah, it seems like, at least here in Israel, that we're right around the corner from some sort of a very big mass vaccination drive. There are certain media reports that indicate that they'll be able to do up to 60,000 vaccinations a day, which is incredible.
Yeah.
I was actually just looking at the distribution of COVID vaccines into the particular, specific states of the United States. And I think that like my home state of Minnesota was expected to receive only 48,000 vaccines in total in the month of January or something like that. And to think that we here in Israel are going to be able to do above that in every day, if that happens, that's purely
I was listening to
amazing.
Our health minister Yuli Edelstein yesterday on the news. We could be almost entirely vaccinated as far as people who want to get vaccinated. And he didn't quite commit to it, but he was optimistic that we could be having Pesach together.
That'd be awesome.
Not me and him. I mean, people with their families could be having Pesach together. If I had Pesach with Yuli Edelstein, that'd be great, but we don't. But before we get to our special guest today, we just have a couple of announcements.
Couple of quick announcements. So check it out, everybody. Jewanced is, of course, a listener-supported podcast. Your support and support of other listeners like you is crucial to make sure that we're able to deliver the best possible content and experiences that you can get. So whether you are a regular listener or this is your first time, if you enjoy experiences like these and you'd like to see us continue growing by leaps and bounds, please consider donating today. You can make a one-time donation to our PayPal. You can make an ongoing contribution to Patreon. Swag is coming.
We do promise Jewanced swag
for
those who make an ongoing contribution to our show, however big or however small it is.
So if you're interested in that, or if your company or organization is looking to sponsor, we can absolutely do sponsorship here on the air. So look us up, give us a call, www.jewanced.com.
Yep.
And one last quick announcement.
So just like on this show, we are, supposedly engaging, we're inquisitive, and we're witty in person. And we can bring that unique talent in bringing out complexity, nuance, and captivating content out of the studio door and into your community experience. So if you're interested in hosting a live dedicated podcast with audience participation, whether virtual or hopefully soon in person, or you want to have us moderate your organization or community's next panel event, we've got the perfect solution for you. Plus, with our extensive network and connections to a broad range of fascinating guests on a range of topics, we have got you covered. For more information on how to engage Jewanced for your next event, please contact us at www.jewanced.com.
Russell Robinson, how you doing, man?
I'm great.
Benny, you want to introduce our special guest today?
I would love to introduce our special guest today. Russell Robinson has served as the Jewish National Fund's Chief Executive Officer since September of 1997. So that would definitely place me in like something in junior high school, probably.
You're supposed to make those comparisons.
I understand, I know. Which means that you've spent the majority of your professional life as a dedicated leader for the Jewish people. Under Russell's leadership, the JNF has been instrumental in developing successful programs for Israel's water crisis, Zionist advocacy and education, community development, environmental work, and the sustainable development of the Negev and the Galilee, all of which play a significant role in the quality of life for all Israelis, and I would argue for Jews worldwide. Under his direction, the JNF launched its $1 billion roadmap campaign and has become one of the most recognized nonprofits for its work, business management, financial integrity, and volunteer involvement. Robinson is featured in the best-selling management book, The 24-Hour Turnaround, How Amazing Entrepreneurs Succeed in Tough Times, and has appeared on TV, radio, and newspapers throughout the world representing the JNF. Did I catch everything there, or
are those some of the highlights?
I'm sure
I learned some myself here.
Welcome to Jewanced. It's truly an honor to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm doing terrific, and thank you both for having me and representing the Jewish National Fund, and to be part of your Jewanced podcast. I think it's an incredible program, and looking forward to doing much more in the future with you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and we actually had a bit of a crossover. I got to appear on JNF's podcast, Israelcast. Fantastic, with Stephen Shalowitz, and we talked about regional development and my Aliyah story and all sorts of amazing things. So definitely looking forward to more collaboration in the future. You've got a backdrop of Jerusalem, but where are you speaking to us from today?
I'm speaking from the international headquarters of the Jewish world, my basement in Livingston, New Jersey. But we had a snowstorm, but I've been in the office for the past couple of months, but the snow kept me down here in the bunker.
Fantastic. Well, we hope you're staying warm and staying safe.
Russell, if I could ask you just quickly to put your headphones back on, because that noise is returned.
The noise is returned.
Yeah,
the noise is returned.
How's this?
It's all better.
Perfect.
Okay. I think that the listeners have gotten used to, after, what are we talking about, like 6 months now of COVID, remote podcasts of all kinds of crazy technical stuff. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. Dan and I were talking a little bit with you before this, and I think it's a good place to start. The three of us happen to be what we kind of, in a pokingly friendly way, refer to as flyover Jews originally. I'm from Minneapolis, Dan's from South Bend, and you're from El Paso.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about it, because I think that it is, listen, the majority of the Jewish community obviously lives in the Los Angeles area, the New York area, Chicago, and Florida.
Right.
But it's an interesting story about the American Jewish community, how it came about, what is it, why is it represented. I think that people should get to know the community that is out there. It is a different Jewish community. It doesn't have it's not so easy to be a Jew in South Bend, and even in Minneapolis, which is a little bit larger. You have to work at it, and I think that does create an opportunity for a lot of the Jewish community that is there.
So what's it like growing up in El Paso, Texas? I just learned in our prep call that it is actually, is this true? It's closer to Los Angeles than it is to the other side of Texas.
No, even more so. Between El Paso and Dallas. Mm-hmm. Dallas is almost halfway through Texas.
So that means Texas is just massive.
The same distance from El Paso to Los Angeles it is to El Paso to Dallas.
Wow. What's it like growing up on the Mexico border out in the Southwest and in a very small Jewish community? What, about 1,500 people? Is that right?
Yeah, when I grew up, it was about 1,500 if you counted everybody, whether they wanted to be counted or not. Again, you had to work on it. You obviously you knew you were Jewish. There was all sorts of issues that came up, but and when you're younger, you don't realize that they're really issues. It just becomes kind of natural. Later in life, you see that maybe that was anti-Semitic, but in the majority of Jews, but in a small Jewish community especially, if you go to Talmud Torah class, if you go to Sunday school class, you are already different. A bar mitzvah is not only a bar mitzvah is not only just a party, it's a big, different than the others that you're growing up with. And so I was one of those Jews that grew up disliking my Judaism tremendously. I thought it was terrible. It took time away from me. It took time away from my sports. It took time away from my family, from friends. A bar mitzvah was a cash flow opportunity and a release from prison. And,
don't we know it?
Yep, absolutely. Right. I definitely sympathize.
Stay Jewish, and I say to the Jewish community today, we have to keep thinking about that customer, because we can't keep doing that and hoping for the best.
Right. And especially, something we can talk about later, especially in, I think, today's America, and maybe even it always was, but I think more so, it's just very easy to just stop being Jewish, because you can be American. You could just be a generic, no offense to Americans. You could just be an American. You don't have to be a hyphenated American anymore. Like maybe, in previous decades, Jews kind of weren't allowed to fully assimilate. And today it's a lot easier.
Yeah, listen, you could not be anything, and you can be anything. And, it's a competitive marketplace. And if you're going to have a competitive marketplace, and I don't want to put Judaism like it's a sale item, but you have to think of it as an investment item. And if you have that investment and you have other investments, well, then how do you make it different? Well, first off, quit saying oy vey. I have no understanding. You're in a business community, Dan. You're building business relationships with the UAE. And you could say there's a lot of issues with the peace agreement, but one of the opportunities that they have and that they're seizing is in our agricultural and our water products and our high tech. Now, if we kept telling the world, oy vey, oy, we don't grow so well, oy, we're growing well today, but it may not be very good tomorrow, who's going to come and want to be part of this? But that's what we do as a Jewish community. Oi, everybody hates us. Oi, we're dwindling. Oi. Well, I have to tell you, the Jewish community has grown. In America, we're up to almost 9.5, 10 million Jews. We've grown by 10%. Everybody that has written the obituary of the Jewish community is wrong. And we're great. And we offer to this community, to every community we live in, greatness. And our connection to Israel is about who we are as a soul, as a people. And it's great. And if we talk in real terms, not just fluffy terms, people want to say, hey, I want to keep investing in that.
So okay, it's terrific. I agree with you 100%, 150, 200,000%.
That's a lot of percents.
It's a lot of percents, but
a lot. You're a big investor.
Dude, I don't think he knows math. Is the problem.
Just, take a couple zeros off. I don't know. Yet it still seems that there are a great many people in various levels of positions in their organizations or in their communities that would be naysayers to that and would say, the assimilation, the Jewish community, the youth is not engaged with Israel.
Youth is not engaged. Anti-Semitism. Everyone hates Israel. Let's not forget the Holocaust, right? Those are kind of the four ways of the Jewish community.
And I don't want to call it a narrative because it's not a narrative. It's the reality of what you just expressed is precisely what I always try to expose and showcase when people come to Israel on a program or something that I've been involved with, which is to say, Israel's an amazing place. It's a dynamic, engaging, fun, amazing, pick your superlative here, but it's actually true that this is a country that is not, we're not on our knees poor, holding our hand out. And on the contrary, it's how to, we're a country that's able to be a great support to the Jewish community in the United States or the Jewish communities around the world. And we're a big family. How do you explain that? I mean,
so organizations, first off, they're wrong. Okay. So let me just be very clear. Organizations sometimes want to perpetuate the organizations, and they found ways that they have found new ways to realize the 21st century. So let me tell you, in 1967, 67, there was a magazine, I think it was Look magazine. It was a magazine, one of those paper things that used to come to your home and be delivered a lot of news in it. And they wrote a thing, the front page was Diminishing Jew. This was a general magazine, not a Jewish magazine. And they predicted in 1967, by the year 2000, the Jewish community of the United States would be 2 million people. Orthodox Jewry would be almost gone in America. Reform Judaism would be almost gone. And the only thing would be around would be conservative Judaism and dwindling. Okay, Look magazine's out of business. We're 9.5 million. Orthodox Jewry is growing. You can't find enough rabbis for the young Israel congregations around the country. Reform Judaism is growing. Conservative Judaism is having its issues. There are thousands of young people. The word assimilation in itself is a detriment to our people. Assimilation means if you're in business, right? I talk to you. Are you interested in buying a car? Are you a car owner? Yes. Are you ever interested in buying a car? Yes. Have you bought a car from us lately? No. Well, you're an assimilated car buyer. Instead, what do they say? You're a qualified buyer. So they do all these demographic studies. And because somebody doesn't belong to a synagogue, doesn't belong to a JCC, they're assimilated. Wait, maybe they didn't like that system. Maybe that's not what's going to be part of their life today, but they're qualified. They already said they're Jewish. They're already connecting to it. You've been in the travel. How many people come? It's their first trip to Israel. Why? Why is it that we even market the way we do with Israel? Because it's a place that you could come, touch, feel, and be part and be excited. Quit talking about the hallways of the Knesset. It's not important to the Jews. Talk about the streets of Beersheba and Kiryat Shemona, Rehovot, in Yoracham. Come and be part. At Jewish National Fund, we always say it. Be part of the people, not as big brother anymore, but as a partner with the people of Israel and help develop new narratives in the North and in the South. Be part of the conversation. Our donors, I can tell you, I will match them with anybody. They don't know the projects we're doing. They know the vision we're doing, and they know the people they're involved with. They can tell you who the mayor of the Arava is, and I guarantee you that if I took a survey in Israel, 80% of the people in Israel don't know who the mayor of the Arava is, but I could give you thousands of our people that do, or the mayor of Kiryat Shemona or Akko. And that's what we have to build. And that's what we're trying to do at Jewish National Fund, that new conversation.
It's fascinating.
And it's really refreshing to hear that. I mean,
and I love hearing the positive energy too.
Right.
It's not, there's anti-Semitism, please donate to us. It's, in one of the things I do, I work at the Jewish People Policy Institute, and I'm trying my hardest to finish up a book. And I actually talk about the decline of the Jewish middle, and I said it's not happening. I said we have and I take all the recent surveys of the American Jewish community from a lot of major communities, and obviously I don't report on all of them, but I look at Boston and I look at I look at Boston and Washington, D.C. and a lot of these bigger communities that have recent studies. And I show, look, if you're talking about a decline, no, you have a decline in institutional affiliation. Yes, you have less people going to JCCs and federations and synagogue memberships. But if you look at actual Jewish behavior, and I have the numbers, I'm going to publish this, and God willing, it'll come out in the next few months. Hopefully we'll be done with the editing. And I can very clearly show what you have is when you look at Jewish behavior and Jewish sentiment of what we call millennials and younger and say, do you like candles? Do you go to services in some way or another? Do you celebrate the holidays? Do you read Israel or Jewish websites and actively seek out Jewish content? There is no decline today from the previous generation to today's generation. There's no decline. There's a decline in people. There's a rise in people calling themselves just Jewish, which is a mistake to say that they're assimilating. Okay, they just don't like labels from maybe from previous generations.
To use Russell's metaphor, they don't want to buy a used car.
Yeah, right. And by the way, Jew is a verb. It's not a noun.
Yeah,
it's our action, and it's what we're all about. And when you do it, Passover. Yeah. I just tell people, think Passover sales over the past 10 years of matzah has increased every single year. Wait, who's buying it?
Yeah.
Must be those people that don't want to be Jewish. I guess people couldn't wait to have matzah. Okay? Why? Because they are. Now, we have to realize where they're at. Now, you went to, Benny, to Alexander Muss High School in Israel.
Yes, I did.
From Minneapolis. The Jewish National Fund, why did we acquire that school? Think about it. We're a fundraising organization. We have projects in Israel, and now we have an institute with parents, teachers, and students. Okay, not like the easiest thing in the world to deal with.
You didn't just buy the school; you saved the school, essentially.
Well, we saved it, but we saved it, yes, but we did it for us because 97% of the Jewish community do not go to Jewish day school. Okay, listen to the number. 97% do not go to Jewish day school. So I think Jewish day school is great, my own kids. But 97% do not go. So Muss High School attracts people to come for a semester abroad experience. Academically, will return them to their public or private school at or above their academic level. They'll come back with their biology and their AP calculus. That's for the parents and for their college resume. For us as a Jewish people, we give them 4,000 years of Jewish history, loving, learning, and living in the land. And so that campus, we had 600 plus students when we bought it. We're now almost at 1,500 a year American students coming from public and private schools. So, Benny, I don't know where you went to school, public, private?
Public school.
Okay. So the Jewish community is also going to a lot of day schools, not Jewish day schools. So we have to capture them. And during high school is the most memorable, most important moment of their life. Everything we do in college is great, but it's too late.
Right.
And let's capture those leaders in high school and let's create them into invested Jews, into Jews as verbs, as Jews as being part of it. And we'll keep building our Jewish community. And that's why we're even building a new campus and a Zionist village down in Beersheba.
That's awesome.
I would say, to anybody that's doubting this, Alexander Muss High School in Israel was the singular most transformative experience that I ever had in my life as a Jew. Period. End of story. Nothing else comes close. Nikuda. Period. I went into that program a typical American Jewish high school student in my town, maybe a little bit more engaged than others because I was more involved with just learning. I'm a little bit more perhaps curious, but after that program, I remember coming back to the United States. I remember walking into my house the day after I returned home from the program. And at the same time, you have these experiences where it's like you feel like so much time has passed, but no time has passed at all.
Yeah.
I walked into the house. I'm a different person. The house looks the same. The hallways look the same. The plant is where it was left. The papers are, where they were, whatever it was. But I looked around the house and I basically just broke down and I said, what am I doing here? This is just weird. I can't believe I had this experience. And I met so many different people from all around the United States, American Jewish kids from around the United States. And I remember that summer afterwards, I traveled around the United States trying to, connect with my new friends. And suddenly, and Russell, you're absolutely right. You're in high school. It's not a college thing. You're still living with your parents. But for the first time, you feel like you have this authentic identity and authentic connection that's much more than just what you would have had if you had not had the experience, or I would argue to say if you only went to Israel for the first time on a program in college. And I don't want to say to the detriment of Birthright, because Birthright is a terrific program, but it definitely is a different thing. It's spending a quantity of time in Israel that's significant enough
at that age
yeah. That you're not just on a trip. It's a life experience.
So Benny, I'll give you a statistic. It's a scary one. If you want to take a scan of the Jewish community, right? You're going to say, okay, we have some problems, so let's figure out what some of the medicine is, right? 25 years ago, the Jewish community was taking 19,300 teenagers on programs to Israel of 4 weeks or more. 25 years later, 3,100.
Wow.
Okay?
That's a huge
look, a lot of people can argue, well, that's maybe not it. I don't know if it is. I can only tell you that I did a body scan, right? And the arm that's injured, this seems to be a statistic. Let's deal with that. So at Jewish National Fund, and by the way, if you want to go to Must High School, any of your listeners out there, go to jnf.org, click onto Must High School and find out about it and listen to Benny. But we're going to be launching a program in the next months that's going to be able to give people up to $7,500 off of our program, as well as 2 or 3 other programs of 4 weeks or more. Because at Jewish National Fund, we want all ships to rise. And so we're looking at other teen programs that are going for 4 weeks or more and helping to fund them. Now, some people say, well, isn't that competition? No, because we're in the Jewish community building business. And at Jewish National Fund, we're ready to make those investments, as we are when we're building our brand new village. I'll talk to you later about it in Beersheba, that's going to bring the Jewish community from throughout the world together for a new conversation.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And good for you guys. I mean, that's really, in an age of kind of institutional competition. We had a good friend from the AJC on a couple of weeks ago. And it's like, no, we need to work together. We're not in competition with each other. We all have the same mission in the end. I want to take a step back. How does a guy from a small Jewish community in the corner of the country rise to be one of the Jerusalem Post's top 50 Jewish influential people and the long-serving and by all accounts successful head of one of the biggest Jewish organizations in the world? Tell us just kind of your Jewish story, how you got to this point.
So I'm going to tell the simpler one. Look, I told you I didn't like my Judaism. I went off to school, and I really, at my bar mitzvah, I thought that when the rabbi, kind of a sick thing about my head, I guess, when the rabbi, I knew when it was coming, because all of our friends knew that there was a moment when the rabbi would turn to you and say, and Russell, you're going to continue your Jewish studies. And it was on the Thursday night practice of the bar mitzvah, right? And my parents were there, my grandparents were there. I love my grandfather; he was there, and I was waiting for this moment for like 3 years to be able to turn to the rabbi and say, "Rabbi," and when I say "Amen" on Saturday, "Amen," I'm gone. I'm never showing up here again. That's how much, and to show you how bad it was, I waited for that moment.
Wow.
So you disengage. I will tell you that when I was a senior in high school, one of my friends asked me to come to a BBYO convention. There was somebody paying for it to go. He said, there's some girls there. We'll have some fun. He lied to me. He said there'll be alcohol. Okay, so, I went. And it was the first time that I saw Jews having fun. Because and my parents were great, positive people, but the Jewish community that I knew was oy vey.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, it was kind of hit me. But I didn't engage. I still disengaged. And there was a guy in El Paso was going to start a summer resident camp for Jews of Albuquerque and El Paso up in New Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
a 2-week camp. I'd never been to camp in my life. I'd never been to day camp. But I had a small business, and he lied to me like every Jewish organization does. He says, don't worry, you don't have to do anything. I always say that's the biggest Jewish lie, but when they tell you that, always know you got to do a lot. I didn't do that much, but he got fired from the JCC 2 weeks before the camp. And he packed up his car and he left. And we've been working on this camp. We had like 250 kids, and we worked on the camp all year. And I said, how hard can it be? I'm running a business to run a camp. I found it was the hardest job of my life.
How old are you during this time?
I'm in my early 20s.
Okay.
And so I decided as a volunteer, I'll run the camp for the 2 weeks. And all of a sudden I saw kids crying, lighting Shabbos candles because they had never lit one before.
Wow.
And, you looked around, I'm sure the experiences that you could talk about in other small towns. And I got in love with it. The story goes that I sold my business. I came and ran the JCC. I then came to the National UJ, and I was leaving there 22 years ago to go back into private industry. And Ronald Lauder from Estee Lauder became the president of the Jewish National Fund.
Right.
I did not know him then. He called me. It was a funny story. I had a friend kept calling me, telling me Ben Gurion's on the phone. My secretary, it was always him. So he said it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and she said Ronald Lauder's on the phone. I didn't know why Ronald Lauder, so I thought it was my friend. So I said, listen, Mr. Lauder, I need 200 tons of cold cream. And all of a sudden this voice comes, he says, okay. I said, who is this? And so he said he wanted to see me. So I figured, why not? I didn't know what he wanted to see. So about an hour into the meeting, he's telling me about Jewish National Fund and I said, Mr. Lauder, I know a little bit about why am I here? He said, well, you're going to be the new CEO. And I said, I'm not. First off, I don't know what you're talking about. Second, I'm looking at another position that I'm going to sign a contract. And he goes, you don't want to do that. You want to do this. And it's a whole story about, it was a fun harassment for a couple of days, even calling my wife and telling her. And finally he told me, he said, Russell, it's just much easier if you say yes. And I thought about it, and I say this to everybody listening and viewing today. Think about it. And I'm very proud to say this constantly. What other billionaire do you know that has involved themselves in institutional organizations? Not Ronald runs a huge foundation, and he could say, okay, we're going to spend $1 here, and everybody around the table says yes. When you come involved into an institution, he has a board of directors that he could buy and sell. And I said, if he's dreaming like this, if he's dreaming about Israel, what he wants to do in the Negev and for water, I got to join this crazy guy. And I have to tell you, for 22 years, it's been very few days that I've regretted. I've been able to work with him when he said, we got to solve the water catastrophe in Israel. 22 years ago, Google it. Everybody said by the year 2020, Israel would be completely out of water. The Middle East would.
Yeah, right. I remember.
Ronald said, we got to take care of it. I said, Mr. Lauder, to be quite honest, I know water comes out of the faucet. But I have to tell you, we studied. And all these years later, the Jewish National Fund across the world, all of us, 13.5% of water in Israel is provided by the 250 reservoirs and recycling centers built and started by Jewish National Fund.
That's incredible.
Okay. Israel always talks about, we reuse 90% of our water. I will show you letters from 20 and 22 years ago and 19 years ago. And people said, Russell, you cannot sell sewage water to philanthropy. They're not going to buy it.
It's not sexy.
And they did buy it.
Wow. And it's incredible. And I've seen these water recycling plants, and it's true. We recycle our sewage water to a level that we don't drink it, but to a level that it is safe to drink here.
Right.
And we're the only Last time, if my memory serves me correct, when I had the tour of the biggest water recycling plant in the country in outside of Rishon LeZion, the Shafdan, they said the next country that gets even close to us is Spain, and they're at about 30% of their water being recycled.
A little less, but you're very good.
Okay.
The United States is 4%.
4%.
Israel reuses every drop of water. Life, Mayim L'chaim, every drop of water over and over. When you see down in the Arava, from the Dead Sea to Eilat, they get 2 inches of rain a year, and it all comes in about 24 hours.
Yeah.
And yet they're producing 55% of the peppers that are exported, 50% of the melons.
Yeah, it's incredible.
They produce tomatoes and 25% of the fish that is consumed in Israel. That is called partnership, Jewish National Fund, the people of Israel, and a good Yiddish cup.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about Jewish National Fund and explain to us, maybe, the relationship to Keren Kayemet L'Israel, which we usually translate as the Jewish National Fund. But so talk us through, kind of, just to understand the organization and its Israeli counterpart, if you don't mind.
So the Jewish National Fund and Keren Kayemet all come from the same grandfather from Theodor Herzl. We all began in 1901. The idea was to repurchase, and I always tell people, repurchase the land of Israel. Not to say that it was ours because of biblical or because of legal. I think we could have won that argument, but Theodor Herzl and the people who thought about it said, listen, let's raise money and repurchase every acre by acre of land. By the way, it gives Israel one of the only nations in the world with a purchase order of its existence. And over the years, it has always been a relationship that has built things like the city of Tel Aviv 104 years ago. 65 housing lots were at a lottery of the Jewish National Fund, Keren Kayemet, that started Tel Aviv. The first street in Tel Aviv, Rothschild Boulevard, was built by Keren Kayemet. So it's a constant relationship. And over time, institutions in Israel have their political connections. The Keren Kayemet, the Jewish Agency, the WZO, the Keren Hayesod, all have this political piece. We have no relationship with that. We're not involved in the political part. We have no seats on their board. They have no seats on our board. And over time, listen, when you're doing the philanthropy and you have to invest it, it's one of the most important responsibilities that you'll have as a human being. Why, when you travel, you give somebody tzedakah? Because they will go in peace and they will go in health by delivering the tzedakah for you. Well, I believe that's our responsibility. We're taking tzedakah, we have to deliver it. So we have our own board of directors, we have our own operation in Israel. We work with Keren Kayemet as needed, as the programs go. But we then have over 65 affiliates. What we decided to do at Jewish National Fund was not to reinvent the wheel. Let's have vision. Let's decide what our objectives are. And then under those objectives, let's have the projects and let's find out who could help implement them. So if we're working with people with disabilities, I don't need to recreate that within my organization. There's unbelievable organizations. But then why work with disabilities? Now, this is a dramatic statement. It's not only because of disabilities. It's in the Negev and the Galilee. Mm-hmm. It's to bring 500,000 people to the Negev. That was a vision that we set. And under that vision, we have made an unbelievable impact in Beersheba, in Yoracham, in the Gaza envelope, down to the Arava. Beersheba, when we started, was 190,000 people 17 years ago, losing 3% of its population per year.
Yeah, I was
today. It's 250,000 people, the fastest growing city in Israel. Go see our 7-mile river walk, our 29-acre lake, our 13,000-seat amphitheater. Go see what we have done in the Lauder Employment Center, bringing people from Ben Gurion University and others to have jobs down the Negev. And soon we're going to have a 21-acre world international Zionist village in Beersheba. And the Galilee, 300,000 people. Go look at what we're already starting to do in Akko with our visitor center, what we're doing with a Chamber of Commerce and a Small Business Association, and we're building the Galilee Culinary Institute in Kiryat Shimona with a food technology center and a medical center, because in that area, The population has gone down by 10,000 people over 25 years.
Yeah.
We have to bring 75,000 people there. You talk about peace in the area. You could talk about our power of our military. Absolutely true. The power of our people living in areas where have been dwindling in populations shows to the world our flag, we are here. That is the Jewish National Fund story.
Right. I was going to say that's the historical heritage of the JNF. It's just, you know, if you look at the how do you say it? If you look at we called it the N shape of settlement in the north of Israel, going up the coast, going to Haifa, going up towards Nahariya, and then coming southeast over the Gilboa and up towards the Galilee finger, building and settling villages on the frontier to create the borders of the state of Israel. And that was definitely something that JNF at that time was instrumental in, and it's terrific that that's happening today. Does JNF also, let's say, like contribute to the infrastructure of jobs in those areas? Is it?
Yeah, because I mean that's one of the big.
It's things. A lot of people.
When you talk to Israelis, and we've kind of had this conversation in my own family. Last time we traveled to the northern Galilee and into the Golan, we said this is beautiful. This is such a beautiful part of the country. It's a much more relaxed lifestyle. I'd love to be able to move up here, and yet everyone you talk to, it comes down to the fact that there's just no jobs up there. You know, so unless you're lucky enough to work remotely, you know, or you feel like commuting 3 hours to the center of the country every time. I mean, have you thought about that as JNF?
Why are we building in the greater Kiryat Shimona area? Our goal is to get it from 23,000 people to 75,000 people. So we have to look, okay, that's great. Now how? Change the narrative. So we spent with the people in the area, with our lay and professionals, 2.5 years studying, listening. So we're building from all parts. Why are we building the Galilee Culinary Institute? And you could go on to GCI, you know, Galilee Culinary Institute by JNF. The food that is produced up there is unbelievable.
It really is.
The culinary from Israel is second to none. But why is the culinary from Israel second to none? It's because of who Israel is, 85 different nationalities. Yeah. So you get a Turkish Jew meeting an Ashkenazi Jew, and then taking their cholent and adding their Turkish spice. And we got this new thing called the Israeli food, right? So let's build a culinary institute. Let's be like Cordon Bleu, one of the best in the world, not a cooking school, a culinary institute. That people from throughout the world will come to want to get a diploma, and which we're going to have. It's going to be a 2-year program. You're going to graduate with business acumen as well as culinary schools. We have Lior Lev-Sarkaz as our director of our culinary part. We have Michael Solonov, the first class is in his name.
Oh, awesome.
We're bringing top chefs in the Kiryat Shimona area. Now, with that, we're building a food technology center and a hub, and the government of Israel is giving tax abatement, or what they call tax abatement, it's an American term, to companies to come to that area for a food technology center. The next technology of the world is in food.
Yeah.
We got to produce food for the world or people will starve. It will be up there in the area. So jobs, opportunity, and then we realized there's no medical services there. So we're building a new medical center in Kiryat Shimona, because if you're a young family and you got the job and the education, but there's no medical service, you're not moving up there.
Exactly.
So we're building that as an opportunity. Then we're building housing sites. There's been housing sites that are there. We're investing into them. And we're building from within the community. We call it our Makom communities that are helping through young leaders and Hashomer and Hugei Sairut, young people. So we're not leaving the community that's there behind. So holistically, we're going to build the strongest area. I'm going to tell you now, if you want a restaurant reservation in 5 years in Kiryat Shimona, you can call the Jewish National Fund.
I'm going to note that. You put a think tank up there, and I'm moving myself.
No, I'm just thinking about, like, you know, the next time you have a group in Kiryat Shimona doing a culinary workshop at a school like that, and really taking it out of Jerusalem and out of Tel Aviv and bringing it to the people. It's a tremendous thing.
Oh, it's incredible. And you know, we go up there sometimes, and it's just, yeah, it seems like it just was never able to take off the ground. You go to a place like Kiryat Shimona, you go to a place like Bet Shean, you go to these kind of places and you're like, okay, it feels just like it's been left behind. So it's wonderful to hear of organizations, you know, that are really putting the money where their mouth is and trying to turn it around. Because I'd love to see the north of Israel and the south of Israel, what we call the periphery here, get that kind of attention, that development attention that they really deserve. Because right now, you know, it's Haifa to Ashdod and then Jerusalem. Like that's what you have right now. And we do need to change that.
So Dan, I have to tell you, we just built a Lauder Employment Center up in Akko, which we have down in Beersheba. It's an opportunity to bring college students to link them to jobs. Now, we found in the Negev and in Beersheba, everybody said there's no jobs. So we opened up an employment center, very big at the beginning, with one person who made phone calls to every company. And we found over 900 engineering and above jobs available.
Wow.
Well, hey, there's no jobs.
Turns out
And then we asked them, why aren't you hiring people? They said, oh, there's no people. So he said, oh, maybe we need to bring the circles together.
Yeah.
So the Lauder Employment Center in Beersheba has already added thousands of new jobs, not even new jobs. We're helping human resource directors and teaching people how to interview. By the way, it's different. If you have a business and I want to interview Benny for a job in Yoracham, and he's in Beersheba.
He's not qualified.
Maybe I'm going to take the risk. But in Tel Aviv or Yerushalayim, you know, Benny sees me on Monday.
It was because Russell knows that I work in tourism. He knows that I might have to look for a job.
Okay. And he sees me on Monday, and I see 3 or 4 more people Monday, and I see 5 more people on Tuesday, and I'm going to see somebody else on Thursday, and in 2 weeks. And then I decide, you know what, after 3 weeks, Benny was the right guy. I'm going to go back. You can do that in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. In Yoracham, if Benny's the right guy, you cannot be a human resource director like in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem area. If Benny's the right guy, bring him back the next day and re-interview him and make a decision, because he's willing to move there. He's willing to take the job, but he's not willing to wait 3 weeks for that program because his spouse or his friends are moving somewhere else, and he is under that influence, and you got to jump on that. So their jobs are there, and what Jewish Diaspora Fund is constantly trying to find, what are the problems and then how to cure it. In Yoracham, you want a house? I can tell you where housing sites are going up. So you could build a house with more square footage than you'll ever have in your apartment in the Jerusalem, Tel Aviv area.
That's true.
And live in a great style in a great place. So you just got to bring information forward.
Yeah, I got to ask you, you know, the common narrative, and I think it's largely true, is that, well, I guess I'll split this into 2 questions. So first, if we talk about the American Jewish fundraising scene, if we're talking about federations, if we're talking about all the major Jewish organizations, they're having a hard time in recent years engaging with new donors, with new philanthropists, engaging in young donors. I've looked at this. The money that's coming into the system is not necessarily less overall, but the number of donors, and especially new donors, is shrunk. Today, it's not that you know, financial difficulties and economic downturn aside, it's not that Americans and American Jews are giving less, but they are tending to give less to Jewish causes and tending to give more to general American causes. And yet you seem to be succeeding. So what is the secret sauce to why JNF in the USA seems to be thriving where so many Jewish organizations are having a difficult time?
So thank you. Our fastest growing part of our donor demographic is our 22 to 40-year-old. The fastest growing.
How do you explain
Why?
that? Yeah.
I believe people want to be part of philanthropy, and they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be part of vision. You have to get, you know, there's a lot of great projects. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great projects. The whole world is full of them. And I can be involved and give, and I'll walk away, and I'll do. But if you want to be involved in dreaming, you know, take the picture, the backdrop around me. You know, everything we're about as a people is a dream. Everything we're about, not only as a Jewish people, but human nature is about that. That's why you go to the movies, to the adventure movies. You can't wait for Wonder Woman. Okay, Gal Gadot also, but it's imagination. And I believe that at Jewish Diaspora Fund, you could be involved in the detail and the imagination and the building of tomorrow. And it's in a true and a way that you can engage it. We have a platform called From Birth to the Boardroom. So when we are a national organization, so if Benny buys a tree in Minnesota in 4th grade, and Dan buys a tree in 4th grade in Indiana, in South Bend. It's an investment. We're not making money, but we got to follow them throughout their life. And then we try to engage them in Alexander Muss High School in Israel. I told you we're at 1,500. We're at capacity, and I got to talk about the new village, which is a vision to build in Beersheba. But we'll follow you from birth to the boardroom. We want you to be a leader. You went to Muss High School, Benny, so if you moved to Israel, we won. And if you're doing a podcast like this, we won. If you're living in South Bend, Indiana, and you became the head of the Jewish National Fund or president of South Bend, we won. If you became the head of the Federation, we won. The idea is to keep building winners for the Jewish community and as people and engaging them. And last, you got to ask. Philanthropy does not happen. Nobody gives away without being asked. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to give away money today. Somebody had to engage them in some way. And we have that opportunity. We're still a nation under creation. The connection to Israel is part and parcel of who we are from the very beginning of the Jewish people. If we give up our soul because you have a problem with the political issue, guys, this is part of everything that we're about, and let's make it part of knowing, again, not the hallways of the Knesset, the streets of Beersheba and the streets of Kiryat Shimona, the people. And then we're building the Zionist village. What is a Zionist village? Yeah, it's a second campus for our Alexander Muss High School because we need to bring 5,000 teenagers a year on a program. And we'll house our birthright groups. And we'll start bringing college gap year programs like we have now. And we'll have college graduates who, after they graduate, spend a year in Beersheba working in high-tech at Dell Technologies, at Intel, at Wix, at biomedical technologies that are there. And if they stay in Israel, we win. And if they come back, we engage them because every Shabbat, they went to Shabbat dinner at somebody's home. And they get to know Avi and Avital on a first-name basis. And then we'll have adults and bring teachers to learn how to teach about Israel. We'll have churches and synagogues, and we'll not have a conversation about right or left, a conversation about diaspora Israel or Israeli. We'll not have a conversation about we'll have a conversation about the common destiny of the Jewish people, our shared destiny. I slammed you down.
Yep. You looked like you flew.
Yeah, actually. It literally looked like you just flew out of your chair into space.
You got to the crescendo of your speech and you flew. You took off like Superman.
So now you gotta see what it looks like.
Actually, we were kind of joking on the prep call. We said Russell Robinson sounds like the alias for a superhero. It's like, Russell Robinson. That's he's really JNF man.
Russell. Wait, I gotta ask. We do a lot of work, both Dan and I, in our respective fields with Jewish federations, and you talked a little bit about development. How does JNF fundamentally, if we were breaking it down, does JNF do development differently than the federation system does development?
Or other major.
I look at it. I just think that I'll give you what happened during the beginning of the pandemic and the quarantine. Who knew where we were going to be, right? March hits. Who knew? Financially, who knew where we were going to be? Was it going to be 1 month, 2 months? But what we did know is that we had an army. The army was called our lay and professionals. So our professionals and our volunteers made over 10,000 wellness calls across the country to our donors. Our president, Saul Lieserbrand, always says he doesn't call them donors, he calls them partners. He says when you give to the Jewish National Fund, you're a partner. 10,000. Now I can tell you, how do I know it? We have a system, a Salesforce system. I could show you the login. 10,000 wellness calls. Out of that, our campaign kept moving in numbers of gifts and in gifts coming in. If you would have asked me in March, would we have ended our campaign on September 30th at our goal? We were all thinking about, do I have to cut 10% staff, 20% staff? What? Not only did we not, we ended up ahead of our goal, both in dollars and in number of donors. We started seeing that the engagement of our people, involvement in our organization, involvement in every aspect of it, we don't fear involvement. You want to be involved in our task forces in Israel? Like I said, you go to Kiryat Shimona, you get to know the mayor of Kiryat Shimona and the people of Kiryat Shimona. This is not a professionally run piece. This is a real cooperative of bringing people and engaging them. Our JNF Futures, our 22 to 40-year-old, our president saw every board meeting, every month. The first thing out of his mouth is, how many people have invited JNF Future to your home or on a Zoom call or Shabbat dinner? Got to keep engaging every one of our committees at Jewish National Fund. Every committee, our budget and finance, every committee has to have 1, 2, or 3 members of our JNF Future on it. So we are all about engaging people and involving people. So our difference is that the organization's theirs. And our vision is not the logo ego of our organization. The vision is how to make the Jewish community stronger for the generation of tomorrow and the generation yet unborn.
Wow. We kind of talked about this at the beginning. It used to be the dynamic. It used to be the dynamic that Israel was dirt poor. Israel was bringing in literally refugees from all over the Jewish world, and American Jewry was well established by that point. And for a long time, there was a big brother dynamic from the American Jewish community. And you've said this actually a couple of times already. We're not big brothers, we're partners. Or maybe I read it in an interview with you. We're not big brothers, we're partners. And one of the things that strikes me, if we always talk about the kind of one of the reasons why there might be tensions in the American Jewish Israel dynamic is I think that
you think?
Yeah, sometimes.
Wow.
I think that there's maybe an unease with some people, both in the American Jewish community and the Israeli Jewish community, of this kind of, I don't want to say a reversal of roles, because it's not that Israel is becoming the big brother, although that might be the case. But you seem to have jumped on this kind of, no, we're not big brothers, we're partners anymore. Did you do that purposefully? Did you sense that? That the dynamic was changing, that Israel is no longer, like Benny said earlier, the beggar with his hand out. Rather, Israel is now a strong, vibrant country with a very successful economy. And so when and how did JNF kind of make that switch? And was it a conscious shift, or was it maybe kind of an unconscious shift?
Very conscious shift. And we saw it I go back to the very beginning of our conversation about investment. When I want you to invest in my company, I tell you how well I'm doing. If you think Israel, after 73 years, is doing so poorly, I don't know, maybe not such a great continuous investment. But everything that those IPOs talked about has come true. And that means that this is the greatest rippling effect and potential investment for tomorrow, because you don't stop investing on the great companies. You keep wanting them to get better. And here's this great institution called Israel that, wow, we made it. And we keep making it. Take the two of you. Listen, there's a whole historical thing. The Theodor Herzl visited almost every Jewish community in the world except the United States because it wasn't supposed to be here. This was a holding place. I could go for hours giving you a whole speech on the history of that. But Israelis have a problem because Zionism to them was moving to Israel, and Americans have a problem because Zionism is also engaging in Israel.
Yeah.
So we allowed this word Zionism not only from our enemies to be an enemy, we built it as an enemy between us. Well, you can't be a Zionist unless you're living here. Well, yeah, that's not who made the definition? So the definition is, let's all be great Zionists and let's bring Zionism back. Take the two of you. You're not the Aliyah that I was raised on. I was raised on that poor Jew that had nowhere else to go, and we're going to save him. And we did. And now we got Jews today through Nefesh B'Nefesh. More Jews are making Aliyah to Israel from North America than anywhere else on a consistent basis. And they're changing into a living bridge. And we're uncomfortable, the Jewish community, because, what about that Jew that got to go get saved? Well, no, there's no Jew in the world today that cannot move to Israel by choice. Well, that's not how I was raised. Don't we have to freedom walk anymore? No, that doesn't have to happen. Okay. Do we have to do some airlifts? No, that doesn't happen. Do we have secret operations? No, that doesn't have to happen. Well, that's how I was raised. Well, we have to change that narrative and discussion. And by the way, sophisticated philanthropy works. If you're not scared of it, open it, have real discussions, have the partnerships, and I'm telling you, people will respond because it's a great opportunity. I could sit with Dan and Benny and I could be having a full conversation, a relationship. I could talk about your work in the UAE and I could talk about your work in tourism, and we could talk, and that's why we started virtual tours, by the way, at the beginning of this, and 5,500 people have joined our virtual tours. We've hired over 219 guides and given them a way of living over 7 months because we thought of them, they thought of us. We started a mitzvah marketplace so that you could order online like a QVC and order products from Israel direct. So small businesses in the north and the south are selling their products and at least keeping their head above water.
Yeah.
Because we know them, they know us. We could have that conversation.
Russell, that's so terrific to hear you say that, because it is so important to those people. When this happened, they were literally SOL. I mean, it's not like me where I'm a salaried employee of a company and I get to go on, unemployment benefits of some kind. I mean, they were really, really, for people that are listening to this that don't understand. They still are. There was no sort of, package for them, no sort of stimulus for them at all to get over it or to somehow make it through. So those types of engagements are super, super important. From your end of it, and again, I mean, maybe you can go take the listener through all the different types of JNF Israel trips or opportunities to get to Israel with the JNF. When do you, in the current reality, when do you kind of, from your perspective, and or when does the average American think that they might be able to get back over here?
Listen, I think you talked about Passover being when most Israelis will have who want to be with the inoculated will be. We're planning right now on trips, and you can go on JNF.org, and we're planning on trips starting in June. We're planning our national conference in Israel next October. Right. And thousands of people could join up. If you want to just experience Israel now, go on to JNF.org and go on to our trips to Israel, our on demand, and you can join a virtual tour, and it goes for a week with a guide live, who we hire, who takes you on a tour to Israel to get you your taste buds going while you're waiting. But as soon as Israel's open, we're talking about, we use the phrase, remember the family, come home for a visit. And we're one of the large providers of tourism to Israel. And as soon as those planes, we intend to load them up and load them up. Right now in Israel, by the way, at Must High School, we have 110 high school students. Our January session sold out. Our March session is sold out. So we're bringing our kids down. We have our own campus, and we could put them into quarantine for 14 days. So, and we have our gap year program going there now. So even if you have high school kids, sign up to try to get them on the programs. But we're ready to go. And the only thing we're doing sometimes is postponing those dates. Yep. But we believe that by no later than June, we're going to have plane loads of people coming to Israel. And I tell people, remember the family, come home for a visit. Don't not take that first trip. Make it Israel.
How old were you when you first came to Israel?
I was older. So, like I said, I grew up in a family that didn't have much, and so it wasn't until the end of my college time that I was able to come. And I always tell this story because it was my grandfather who had never been to Israel, had never been on an airplane in his life. And when I was probably pretty down about being a Jew, he said to me, Russell, just do me a favor. When you get to Israel, now, I never thought I'd go. So when you get to Israel, you go to the wall. Now, he had never been. He said, I want you to go to the wall, and before you touch the wall, turn around and see all the Jews coming to the wall, see all the different nationalities of Jews, and decide if you want to be the one that breaks the chain. Now, I always thought it was a great story, but what did he know? He had never been there. And I went there, and I turned around. It was like my grandfather had set up a Hollywood stage of every kind of Jew coming and walking towards me. And I looked up, and I couldn't believe that he had set this whole stage up of a chain that I won't break. So that was part of my aha moment as well. But that my aha moment when I'm talking about the biggest project happening in the Jewish world, this new World International Zionist Educational Village in Beersheba, 21 acres of land, that in 5 years, we're all going to be there. Dan, Benny, all of us are going to be there. And we're going to hear conversations, a Jew from Buenos Aires, from a Jew from Birmingham. We're going to have teenagers from Beersheba and Los Angeles. We're going to have teachers from all around the world. We're going to have adults and young leadership and major donors. And we're all going to be just walking down a quad, having a conversation about our Jewish world and the future of the Jewish world.
Let me ask you something. You mentioned kind of that your vision, or kind of the American vision of Zionism, is one thing, and the Israeli vision has always been, well, make Aliyah. If you're Zionist, come here and be part of it. And I appreciate that you're able to kind of just put that aside and say, let's all work together for the common denominator. But at the end of the day, I mean, how do you address, as a person, not as an organization, how do you think about it that, what does Zionism mean? I mean, does it mean to be here and build the country and be Israeli? And to say the future of the Jewish people is here, or what is the alternative? If you're in America and you're a proud Zionist, you don't even have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. Let's say you're a proud Jew and a proud Zionist. What does that mean? And how does that differ from the Israeli vision of Zionism to you?
So first off, the Israeli vision of Zionism comes out of organizations from people who don't know, as we talked about at the beginning of it, they don't know Judaism from Jews from around the world and everywhere. Abraham said, Lech Lecha, right? He was told by God, Lech Lecha, go forward to a new land. That made Israel part of my very existence as a Jew. By the way, before kashrut, before circumcision.
Yeah.
All right. The only thing before that was Shabbat. And go forward to a new land. We're the only people in existence that have a land as part of our existence. The only. So first, I kind of take that as a pretty powerful piece. Second, the power of Israel is in the power of the diaspora, and the power of the diaspora is on the power of Israel. And we work together. And the realities are realities of where we live. But if Israel is a nation of Israelis, no conversation. But if Israel is a nation, we always say, Jewish National Fund people always say this. Israel is a nation of 15 to 16 million Jews. 7.5 to 8 million live within its borders. If we're all part of the nation still of creation, if we believe that it is a Jewish nation, if we believe that it is not just a nation of citizens, then we all have an opportunity, not just a right, an opportunity to be part of the great vision, the great building, wherever we are. I won't let anybody disenfranchise me because of some political statement they want to make, because it's my right, it's me, it's my soul. And I'm not, and I don't believe that any diaspora Jew should allow themselves to be disenfranchised at all from that. We're part of this great, great nation called Jewish people.
So, controversial question. When we have government representatives and ministers here in Israel that would love to disenfranchise the American Jewish
or the diaspora
yeah. Jewish population of planet Earth, and you can pick a multitude of different ways that they might do that based on your level of observance or where you live or who you marry or things like that. Does JNF get involved and say, you know what, we have the ear of certain people, we're going to make a point about this? Or is there an activist sort of I don't want to say agenda, but is there some sort of activism that's working towards reminding the Israeli government that we are one Jewish people?
We don't do that. It's not part of our, as I say, every organization is a different kind of tool, and certain tools are good for certain jobs and certain tools are not.
Right.
But I will tell you that is why I go back to what I tell you about getting to know people. Go talk to the people of Beersheba. Go talk to the mayor of Beersheba. He knows more about diaspora Jewry, I assure you, than anybody in the hallways of the Knesset.
Yeah, Ruvik's a good man.
And go talk to the mayor of the Arava, or the mayor of Yerucham, or the mayor of Kiryat Shimon, or the mayor of Akko. Go talk to the people that we're talking to during this whole time of quarantine. We're having conference calls, Zoom calls with young people in Israel, with our young people here who are talking about homeschooling and talking about quarantine and job issues in the future. We are them and they are us. And if we have those conversations, if we only focus on the political issues, guess what? Here in America, I don't go to the hallways in Congress every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, the Jewish diaspora leadership thinks they got to go to the Knesset every day.
Yeah.
I don't want to go. I want to go to the streets of the state road.
Speaking of the Knesset, which you're not going to, there's a bit of a debate, and it comes up every once in a while, that whether diaspora Jewry in some form or another should have a say in the decision-making in Israel, whether it should have a say all around, whether it should have a say on issues like the Kotel that touch on the diaspora. Do you have any thoughts on that? Would you like to see some sort of mechanism where the Jewish diaspora, maybe major communities, maybe major organizations, have some kind of say in the Israeli decision-making process?
Okay, they have a say in over 68,000 people who made Aliyah in the past 10, 12 years through Nefesh B'Nefesh from North America. My own daughter lives, in Tel Aviv. She votes. She's part of it. She is part of a whole diaspora community, and people don't even want to look at that. You could take Rehovot and other places, but in Tel Aviv, Nefesh B'Nefesh brings together Olim, North American Olim. By the way, they're not the North American Olim that people have in their mind.
Right.
They're not wearing tzitzis and they're not wearing yarmulkes. They're there because they love Israel. Now, I'm not saying it's negative to be part of the tzitzis yarmulke. I'm talking about the image. People are away thinking, well, it's the religious Jews. No. And they want to be part of an Israeli society, and they're coming with the understanding of the diaspora society. So what I tell everybody is that, if you really want to be part of Israel, you can move, and that changes those kind of pieces. If you want to be activist, then go talk. There's 68,000, people made Aliyah, thousands of people coming all the time. Talk to the people. Quit talking to the members of Knesset. Guess what? I want to just help everybody with what I found out about democracy. Politicians like votes. Okay? So go talk to the people who are voting, not to the people who are getting the votes. Okay? And I think we're doing it wrong. If you don't believe in a certain way or want to believe in a certain way, great. But talk to the people. Get a relationship with them. Build that bridge. But should I be making the decisions about whether it's a 65-mile-per-hour driving or not? Now you say, no, but that's where do you make the line?
Right.
Where decisions is going to be made? Okay, on driving, you guys can't be involved. Okay? But on the Kotel, you can. So, well, where else? Well, you can on kashrut as well. Okay, so can I make it on the zoning? No, not on zoning. So you got to, everybody's very good at making lines, but they don't know where the lines are.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting approach. A few years ago, I worked on, from a research perspective, on the issue of non-Orthodox, Reform, conservative, and generally pluralistic Judaism in Israel. And one of, kind of things I come back to, and I'm asked about often, and again, I approach this as from a research perspective. How do something that the American Jewish community especially cares about, because close to 70% of it, 80% of it even, is non-Orthodox. And they say, how can we make inroads in Israel? You got to convince people that it's relevant. You can't, push, lobby the Knesset if there's no public backing for it, if they don't feel. So that's an interesting, it's a very pragmatic and kind of diplomatic answer you gave, but there's a lot of wisdom behind it. Let me segue real quick here, and we're getting some great comments on our feed, and couple things pop up here. So it's people writing from either the South or the North, and they're thanking you and they're thanking JNF for all you do. And every single person here has called you both a visionary and a leader. One of these visionary things that we read about when we were preparing was something about $1 billion roadmap. And I'm curious what that means. What is this $1 billion roadmap vision of the JNF?
So 7 years ago, we were growing, and we're still growing, and we wanted to make leaps. So we set $1 billion campaign over 10 years. Now, we did something even not calling it by the numbers. We sat down with our leadership, and we decided if we raised $1 billion, where we're going to spend it. So we made a decision 25% was going to be spent on next generation. Now, I really hats off to our leadership, because in that next generation, that's for investment of philanthropic dollars you're not going to see the results of, okay? You know, you don't see Schwartz's name up on the building because you're going to tattoo a 4-year-old, okay? So you're investing in things that you're hoping are going to be great, but they're tomorrow. 25%, and we talked about the Negev in the south, and the Galilee and the water, and people with disabilities, and we put down, if we raise it, this is what we're gonna do. So I gotta tell you, I think it's $740 million into our 7th year, so we're ahead of pace. We're not changing the goal, but people have joined in because, again, it's vision, and they got to be part of the vision.
One of the people that wrote to us is actually, you'll know him. It's Nissan Ben Hamo from Arad, who writes,
Mayor of Arad.
Russell Robinson, leader, visionary. The people of Arad salute you.
Hi, Nissan.
So shout out to Nissan.
And really, it's amazing to see that that's what the comments are of people recognizing that. So really, props to you and to the JNF.
But I'll talk about Arad, because this is, by the way, not me. If you had 1,000 of my lay leaders, they could tell you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Here's a mayor who decided to leave business to become a mayor. Okay, didn't need to do this. Okay, he came back and said, I want to help build Arad. Now, in that, it wasn't to build a project. He had a vision. He has to grow population. So one of the first projects we did is we built a central park. There was no central park in Arad. He said, so what's a central park? We knew that, but we made it first class. If you haven't seen it, go to Arad. Now the housing sites that we invested in as well, you can't buy a house in Arad. Now we're going to the next phase and the next phase. So if you make everything, there's a lot of parts to what we did as well, music center as well, and helping again for young leadership within, a business center, the Lauder Employment Center, and helping tech companies come there. But the image, that's why in Beersheba, why did we build a river walk and a lake?
Is there a river?
There is a river in Beersheba.
By the way, you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen our new lake, go to Beersheba, buy a boat. Okay.
Shows you how long it's been since I've been in Beersheba.
So Beersheba, 17 years ago, people, we did a survey. Israeli said, I stopped for gas on the way to Eilat.
Yep.
I know somebody who served in the army there, or I know somebody who went to Ben Gurion University.
Yep.
So we knew that to change Beersheba, they had a shopping center. They have a Soroka medical school. You know, they had everything if you checked off. But the image was so negative. So together with the people of Israel, with the mayor, Ruvik Danilovich, and the people of Beersheba, 7 miles. It doesn't have water in it all the time, but it has 7 miles of park, 3 times the size of Central Park in New York. We just finished completing a 29-acre lake, all recycled water in the middle of Beersheba. And we've redone the old city. We have created a 13,000-seat amphitheater, the largest entertainment venue in Israel. And I could go on, but the image now in Beersheba is, wow, how can I move there now? And that is our village. So that is changing narratives.
Dan has to go back to Beersheba. That's the bottom line here. You hadn't been probably since you studied at Ben Gurion.
I went to Ben Gurion for a semester back in 2003. And that's really the last time I've spent time in Beersheba.
It's a different place.
You will not recognize it. Listen, I hope to be there in Israel in January, February. So, you can join me.
I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. Please let me know when you come. Do you guys have projects that are focused on your JNF-USA? Do you have projects that are focused on the American Jewish community for the sake of the Jewish community, or is your model focused on Zionism and building up Israel as that piece of Jewish identity?
So for the sake of the Jewish community, Zionism has to be part of it. If you want to grow, if you want to be strong as a Jew and Jewish community here, Israel has to be part of that narrative. So we are one of the great providers of Israel engagement from kindergarten to 8th grade in the United States. About 25,000 kids a year participate with us. Our Alexander Muss High School in Israel, we started Sababa Society. By the way, started by young kids. A young guy in Atlanta, Georgia, named Zvi, started a program. He came to us. He says, I got this magazine that my parents get. Why can't I be part of this whole thing? And he started the Sababa Society for teenagers, which is growing. And it's not to take away from the BBYOs and the USYs. It's an add-on of Israel engagement to it. I told you we're going to be starting a new program in the next months. It's going to be coming out of taking teenagers to Israel in long-term programs, our Roots program, which is a non-academic program that we have in the summer, and all leading towards college. College, we do Positive Israel on college campuses. 57 college campuses. We don't bring speakers to talk about Oy Vey Israel. We talk about Positive Israel. We bring about the story of a farmer who's bringing food on their plate from Africa. Oh, because of a water technology created a place called Israel. Israel makes the world a better place. And then we bring alternative winter break. So if you've been on Birthright, we work with Shorashim on Birthright. We have a program after Birthright. Come back and spend time volunteering in Israel, alternative winter break. Then we have our JNF Future. So it's a lot of engagement for Israel. And then, like I talked about, the new International World Zionist Education Village that we're building in Beersheba that is going to bring world Jewry together in a new conversation.
It's awesome.
So I got to switch gears here for a second. I see we're friends on Facebook for like a long time. I see your photos. Best friends. I see you on Facebook. First off, you're always wearing a suit. Doesn't matter where you are. You're representing, respect. But you're in Israel all the time. I mean, you're here probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would say you're probably here like 10 times a year, 8 to 10, maybe 12 times a year, once a month, something like that.
Closer to 12.
Wow. And you're all over the place in America too. You meet a ton of interesting people all the time because in the photos, you're always with really interesting people. Who are some of the most interesting people that you've met here in Israel that really stand out?
So I'm going to talk about, I could talk about Nissim in one way, not because he wrote in, because here is a guy again, to take on a rod as a community. I'm always enthusiastic. Ruvik Danilovich. Ruvik Danilovich, number one, he looks like he's going to get bar mitzvah next week. When he became mayor, he ran against a guy who was mayor for 15 years, who was an Israeli war hero. Nobody knew who Ruvik Dan. By the way, I had seen him one time at a city hall meeting, and he took. And Ruvik Danilovich, that means he became mayor in November. In May of that year, he brought the city together like on an outdoor drive-in theater, but it was the city hall with big thing, and he showed what he was going to accomplish in 5 years. And he told his citizens, if I don't accomplish this, don't vote for me. And he won the last election by 92% or something like that. Young, dynamic, wants to do the right thing. The people in Kiryat Shimona, now in Kiryat Shimona, it was a town in which, was, out of 14 members of City Hall, 7 of them are under the age of 40. The mayor just turned 40, took on the establishment because they didn't want to sit on the sideline.
It's amazing.
So, and I'm giving you mayors, but I can give you people that I've met throughout. People who just care and want to make a difference. There's a woman named Adele. She lives on the Gaza envelope. She doesn't know anything except for her own family, but she started writing blogs and putting on Facebook and talking about the real stories of the Gaza envelope. So I've met so many people, and I say this, that are really my heroes of people who are there, and they're great. And I tell you about the next generation, you, and all the next generation here in America and the ones that I meet in Israel. If you are worried about tomorrow, don't. This is the greatest next generation in the history of the Jewish people. And they are going to do better than anything ever done before.
I believe it.
It's amazing. That's really amazing. Let me ask you something. If and you know what, this might actually be a superfluous question, hearing everything that you said, but I'm curious. If someone comes to you, another Louder, even though Louder's still doing what he's doing, and really yishar koach to him. Someone comes to you and says, I'll write you a check for whatever it is you need to do whatever project it is you need for the Jewish people. What's your dream project that you would love to get off the ground?
I go back to this international Zionist village in Beersheba, and I tell you why.
You're doing it. You're doing your dream project.
I think we're in a crossroads. It's everything you're asking, and people are talking. And we have an opportunity, I think, because of Corona. Because all of a sudden we found ourselves as the same people. You're at home. You're homeschooling your kids. Guess what? They're homeschooling. We're all doing it in France we're all feeling the same pressures. Wow, it's the first time. So maybe we got time to pause and to think about it, the future. And in those crossroads, we have to start having a conversation that is no longer the one that we're having, because the next generation doesn't want to have that, as we talked about. They want to have a conversation with Dan and Benny. They want to get to know people. Dan and Benny wants to get to know us, and it's the Israelis that are Avi and Avital and so on. The Zionist village that we're building, it's $350 million dream. It's huge.
Wow.
But for tomorrow's Jewish community, it'll be the only place on the face of the earth that will start bringing Jews all together into a conversation, and non-Jews, churches to come, not talk about the politics with a synagogue, but to talk about our history of 4,000 years of the Jewish people, the history of Christianity, where it came from, the Roman Empire, all can be studied in a place called Israel. By the way, we're building this village about 600 yards away from Abraham's well, where the conversation all began for all monolithic religions. I think it's a moment in our time. I'm so passionate, I'm so a believer that if tomorrow's Jewish community could come together like this, yes, we'll have it's not us running the programming. It'll be institutes. It'll be the Hartman Institute, and it'll be Ken Stein, and it'll be synagogues, and it'll be people utilizing our facilities. It'll be our high school and other high schools. It'll be college programs and other college programs. It'll be interns, all people coming together, teachers and elders and JNF Futures and other young leaders coming together. And a Jew in France and a Jew in Los Angeles and a Jew from Beersheba, and we're sitting around and we get to have a conversation like this, and we learn a little something about each other, and we drink a cup of coffee together, and then tomorrow we do the same, and then maybe on the third day we do the same, and we find out about your children and my children, and then they do what Benny said he did after he finished MUS. He started traveling America, meeting the friends he never knew he had. If we start doing that, that's the world we're in. We're in this WhatsApp, YouTube, podcast world. It's no longer about the borders of our city or of our communities. We're the Jewish community border of the world. And we're all blessed to have a place to come together in, called a place called Israel.
That's incredible. Yeah. And you know, we talk about this kind of new world that we're in, and especially now during COVID times, everything's online. And that it has benefits, not just challenges, and not just sticking points. And that's, you know, it blurs the boundaries between communities. You know, you don't have to be in the Minneapolis community anymore or in the Rehovot community anymore. We can make a new community.
But I would say, and Russell will probably agree with me, there is no substitute for actually sitting down with somebody face to face, person to person. I mean, I lament the fact that that we're doing this remotely, and it's not because you know, you're in Livingston, New Jersey, and we're in Israel, because you come to Israel so often. Chances are, if this was, you know, normal times, we'd be having this conversation in person, because you'd be here or we'd be there or something like that.
Yeah. But it doesn't replace it, but it allows you to develop. You know, if you had community that was going this way,
add on to it.
It allows you to do this, and it allows you to have interest-based communities versus geographic-based communities. And it opens up, you have to look at it as something that opens up possibilities. And you know, this is why I appreciate your positivity and your vision here on this. And there's a lot of, you know, people, a lot of organizations really trying to do a lot with this. And right now there's not much we can do, but once we get back to a place where we are traveling and where congregations and communities can meet personally, I don't want to see the non-geographic communities that have sprung up disappear. I want it to be something that just adds to the Jewish world. And I'll give you an example. You talked about sitting down with people and talking, and we go back to the UAE thing. I think it's amazing. I've been talking to people, not just from the UAE, but from all over the Arab and the Muslim world, all of a sudden, really just the past couple months, having these conversations. And when I've sat down with the people, in my case, from the UAE and Bahrain, you start talking about the region, and then you start talking about your kids and schools and jobs, and nothing brings people together more than just to realize they're human just like you. And it's incredible. What do you think of all this, by the way, of you've been doing Israel advocacy. Thank you. Activism, advocacy. Activacy. It's a new word. I just coined it. You've been doing Israel activacy. I like it. For a long time. What do you think all of a sudden of 4 Arab countries within the course of a few months, and the possibility of additional Muslim, if we include rumors of Indonesia and Pakistan, and maybe soon, or at least one day, Saudi Arabia? What do you think of all this?
Again, I think that, again, for anybody that didn't see it coming, you don't have your eyes on the reality of, first off, human life. I believe that human beings who read and write and understand want to make sure their children are safe and that the world doesn't blow up tomorrow. So down in the Arava, I talk about the Arava, there's a place called ACAT, an agricultural center for Institute for Food and Training. We have about 1,800 students that come from Southeast Asia and from Africa, and they come for 9 months, and they learn get 22 college credit hours in their universities and go back. Many of them from Indonesia, from places that have no relationship with Israel. And they may come to become job seekers. They leave to be job creators, and they love Israel. And I've gotten to go to Vietnam and Cambodia and meet with them, because the signing IMOUs with the different universities, and I see them years after they graduated, and they come and they're talking. And you've got a guy in Kenny, and his name is Kenny. He's from Kenya. I know it sounds funny, but he's a great Facebook. If you haven't been on his Facebook, join Kenny. He has a company in Kenya called something like Arava Kenya Agriculture. He, on his bicycle, he has the Israeli flag. He's the greatest ambassador. So people coming together bring people together. And if we had time, I'm going to talk to Benny and Dan. I'm going to find out where your family, how they get to Minneapolis, how they go to South Bend, Indiana, how did mine get to El Paso, Texas. We're going to find out that it was a town in Lublin, or it was a town in Lod, or it was Alsace-Lorraine, or it was Spain. Somehow we're going to maybe even talk about our DNA, and we're going to find out the percentages and where they come. And we're all linked. And then we're going to talk about recipes, and we're going to have fun and talk about how your grandmother ruined the gefilte fish, or made a great gefilte fish and complained about making the chicken soup. Those conversations are universal.
Absolutely.
And we got to keep building on them.
Before we wrap up, I kind of, maybe something I should have thrown in at the beginning here. Growing up in a place like El Paso, I'm assuming there's a big Spanish-speaking population down there.
Sí.
Do you speak Spanish, by the way?
Yo hablo español. No sabe inglés para 6 años, porque mi mamá, papá, su trabajo todo el día.
I understood part of that.
I got it.
Did you ever run across stories of the descendants of conversos, of Sephardic Jews who had to hide their Judaism and pretend to be?
There's a rabbi there now. He was there after I left. He's done a whole book on them. He has, I think it's Rabbi Leonard, I believe his name is there. He was the former rabbi of the conservative congregation. It's a great story. So, by the way, it tells that exactly what I said. Here's our Jews that somehow had a Shabbat candle left over from generations, or they don't know why on Friday night they did this, but they were passed it down. It's in us, and they're all linked. And when it goes back to the story about Zionism, they're linked by that story of Abraham and our land of Israel. And that land of Israel and that story and our linkage of who we are as a Jewish people, link them, link us. And don't let anybody else ever try to disenfranchise or disassociate us with that. I won't give up my franchise.
Lovely, really lovely. So maybe we'll wrap up. Again, you've been called a visionary. You clearly have infectious energy and optimism. I say that in the best way. What's your vision for 10, 20, 50 years from now? What would you like to see, for when your grandkids are having grandkids? What is your vision of Israel and of the Jewish world and the relationship between them?
And for JNF.
And for JNF.
So for JNF and for the Jewish community, I believe it's again about the people to people, the real people to people relationship. I don't say it as a tagline. It's going to be real. It's going to be still traveling back and forth. It's going to be Israel as part of that opportunity to be part of, whether you live in El Paso or Buenos Aires or in Jerusalem or in Beersheba, and that you get to be part of the soil of Israel, the soul of the Jewish people. And I see that in the future is that, whether it's WhatsApp or they're going to have something much more ingenious to be able to communicate, it's going to be your children's children with my children's grandchildren, whatever you call it, saying, hey, Avi, you want to meet in London? And the friendships and the traveling across the United States, spanning that you did, and the friends that you have and the people that we know, those are the strength that we are as a people. It's in the conversation and it's in the communication. And we've never allowed anybody to take that away from us. Don't allow our leaders of the Jewish community to stifle us. Let's bring it up. I see the Jewish community greatness. I see that we're going to be the growing and growing and growing and stronger. I believe it in my heart. By the way, the world needs us. We're the greatest thing that has happened to the world. We gave democracy and language. We've given music and science and art. We have given food. We have given spirit. We have given vision. We're a pretty great people. Let's keep telling our people how great we are, not because we want to proselytize only, because it's true. And I want to be part. In a few weeks, we're going to be celebrating Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat. Think about this. What other people have a new year for the earth? We are the beginners of Earth Day. Don't give it up. We have a new year for our soul, a new year for the earth. We're a pretty darn neat people.
That we are.
I'd like to think so.
Listen, Russell, the next time you're in Israel, we're definitely going to get together. Dan and I we've been, I don't want to say converted, but we are definitely major fans of JNF. I've always been a major fan of the JNF, but your positivity and your devotion are absolutely contagious.
Yeah, this is great. The
fact that it's been able to come over the airwaves and come through Zoom into this little room of ours in Rehovot from, well, you're in Jerusalem if I look behind you, but you're not. You're probably in like a living room somewhere in Livingston, New Jersey. It's nothing less than a miracle in our time. And I want to thank you for your positivity. It's not always easy, although these days it's a lot easier when thinking about Israel and where Israel is in the world. But ending 2020 with a positive note like this is definitely a treat for us. And again, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you guys are doing amazing work, JNF, under your leadership, and a lot of people here in Israel, the ones that know what you're doing, appreciate you, and hopefully now more people will be aware of what you guys are doing. Yeah, more power to you, and
yep, and
you continue with these successes.
And I would just add to that, like as we start ramping up back towards getting back to normal in the world, I'm definitely gonna be traveling around Israel, trying to see different sites, assess where things are, the readiness of different places. I'd love to check out the village in Beersheba and see how it's coming along, as well as any other projects that you want us to expose. But
I'll be happy to join them.
You got it. And I tell all of you, go to jnf.org. You can find out about our programs, our missions, our virtual missions, our missions that are going, our trips. You'll find out about our projects. And I look forward to traveling to Israel. Beersheba will go to one of the great restaurants in all of Israel. in Beersheba. We'll go to one of the great restaurants in all the Middle East in Akko. That's what I know. Good wine, up in the Galilee, and we'll do a piece on it there too.
Sounds great.
Sounds like Russell's a foodie. Russell, do you cook at home?
I do.
Are you a barbecue guy, being from Texas?
I love cooking. I've always wanted to be a chef, and so I'm just looking for, when we open up the Galilee Culinary Institute, to have that one opportunity to really dice and slice, and wear the whole uniform and pretend.
We're both foodies also, so I think we might have to join you.
Now we're talking.
We're gonna make it happen.
Amazing.
All right, Russell, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
And you flew off again. The timing of when you do that is great. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful.
I don't know.
Have a wonderful last night of Hanukkah, and a wonderful end of 2020. And thank you to you. Thank you to JNF, and thank you to all of our listeners who have joined us today.
All right, Russell, peace and love.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.